take a look at solving equations by multiplying or dividing. A few steps I want to throw out here. First of all, in order to do this solving, well, anytime you're asked to solve an equation, that means your goal is to get that variable by itself. So we want to find the variable, see what's hanging out with it, and then do the opposite to get rid of it. And when we do that opposite thing, we have to do that on both sides of the equation. That with a fraction involved. Okay, well, first of all, the initial reaction might be, and let me rewrite this over here and see if we can't get a better feel for this. I could write this as 4/5 times r is equal to 32. That would be the same thing as what I have written here. Okay, so that being the case, there's a couple ways I could approach this. First of all, I could say 4r is being divided by 5. I want to get rid of that first, so multiply by 5 on both sides. Then I'd have 4r is equal to 32 times 5, that number. Then I could divide by 4. But rather than that, let's take a look at how we could get rid of this fraction all at once. Well, when we were over here, it's multiplication. We divided to get that variable by itself, so we could divide by 4/5. Now, dividing fractions. Refresher here. When we divide fractions, we end up multiplying by the reciprocal. Keep, change, flip, some say. Well, let's just skip to the flip. So rather than dividing by 4/5, let's multiply by 5/4. And let's take a look at what happens here. Notice in this part, the fraction part, I've got a 5 on top, 5 on the bottom. Remember what I can do if I have that? Those cancel out, right? And same thing with the 4s. I've got 1 on top and 1 on the bottom. So those all cancel out, and I'm just left with r. Perfect. Exactly what I'm looking for. I want that r by itself. Okay, so how did I do that? I multiplied by the reciprocal of this thing. So we got to do that on the other side. Got to keep the peace. Got to do the same thing on both sides. So multiplying by 5/4. Now, remember, if we've got a whole number to multiply fractions, don't forget those fraction skills. We've got 32/1. Then I could multiply straight across. And do you notice here we've got the 32 times 5 divided by 4? That's what we talked about earlier here. So it shows up, but another way that we could do that is we could simplify, right? We could simplify that 4. That would become a 1. This would become an 8. Divide the 32 by 4, and then multiply across, and I would end up with 8 times 5/1. Well, 8 times 5 is 40/1, just be 40. Okay.
Look at a problem like this, and this is where we start to get into things that are more complicated, but still the same basic rules that we've done. We have a fraction, 2/3, that's being multiplied by our variable x, and that's equal to 16. Using our rule, undoing what has been done, we would say we're multiplying x by 2/3. So to undo multiplication, we would do division. And we would divide this side by 2/3. Must do the same thing to both sides. We would divide this side also by 2/3. Which means anytime there's a fraction in front of our variable, to undo that fraction, all we need to do is multiply by our reciprocal, which is just the numerator and the denominator changing places. So to undo the multiplying by 2/3, we will multiply by 3/2. Rule 2, do the same thing to both sides. So I need to also multiply this side by 3/2. The 3's and the 2's will divide out, giving me what I want, which is the x by itself, which is the goal of equation solving. And now I need to multiply the 16 by the 3/2. We've done several problems like this in the past. Some people will use a calculator at this point. I think the easiest way to do this is to simply look at it as this. Since I have 16 in the numerator and 2 in the denominator, 16 divided by 2 will equal 8. So the 16 and the 2 will reduce out and just become 8. 8 times the 3 then is